Hey, boys and girls, it's Nancy A. Shenker, also known as the geezerproofer. And as many of you know, my goal with this podcast is to help people of all ages become beezers rather than geezers. What is a beezer? A beezer is someone who be in the moment, be relevant, be curious, be active, be connected, and be their true selves, no matter how old they are. So when I launched the podcast about 30-odd episodes ago, the theme was going to be life, sex, and tech. And shocker, what I'm finding out is that my most popular episodes are those that deal with sex, followed closely by tech, but tech that relates to sex is also super popular. And life is a good generic topic. And I do sometimes intermingle like real talk about longevity and aging with academicians and gerontologists. So I do try to mix it up. So you pick what you want to listen to. So what's happened over the last couple of months is I started down this very interesting rabbit hole. It began with my having Stella Foss as a guest, and she started writing erotica when she was over 50. She, in turn, turned me on to Billy Best, who did an episode about the vagina. I've also interviewed Paul Gittins, who is a urologist, and he talked about the penis. And one of my other guests, Tammy Shackley, talked about people who come out after the age of 50. So as I said, I went down this rabbit hole or some other kind of hole where I started talking much more about sexuality and people discovering things about themselves and their bodies after 50. And so far, they've been pretty popular. So my guest today, Kathy Labriola, was actually referred to me by one of my other guests. And that's kind of how it's been happening, is that people are now referring other people. So if you would like to be a guest on my podcast, please reach out. It's thegeezerproofer@gmail.com. So little known fact, my father was a gynecologist. So I grew up talking about sex and vaginas and birth control at the dinner table. Doesn't everybody? But despite that, my mother, who was raised in an Orthodox Jewish household, had all kinds of hang-ups as they related to the human body, sexuality. There's a Yiddish expression, feh. If something is unpleasant, she would say feh. And so I grew up in this very conflicted world. It was also the 60s, 70s, where our generation invented the sexual revolution for all intents and purposes. So I was very conflicted. And so I think it's kind of interesting that here I am at almost 70, opening my mind, my heart, parts of my body to alternative lifestyles, which is what we're going to talk about today. And what is really an alternative lifestyle? I mean, we've become so much more accepting as a society, at least in some parts of the world, maybe not so much in Arizona yet, where people are talking honestly and openly about sexuality, sexual preferences, et cetera, et cetera. And what I've discovered over the last few weeks, as much as I thought I knew, my mind has been blown, totally blown by the number of really wonderful, intelligent, intellectual people who are choosing to live alternative lifestyles. So what better way to become a beezer rather than a geezer than to explore your own sexuality? So with that as my prequel, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, who's first going to just start out by defining who she is professionally, what she does, the book that she's written, and then we're going to jump pretty quickly into a conversation around polyamory, which a lot of people don't even know what that is. So I will leave it to Kathy to define that as well. So hit it, Kathy. Honored to have you as a guest. We were joking around that, Kathy didn't realize we were going to be videoed. And I said, part of being a beezer is to keep it raw, real. This is what 60-something, 50-something looks like. I'm not going to get fake lashes. The hair is kind of fake, but the rest of it, I'm just going to do me. So go ahead, Kathy.
Hi, well, my name's Kathy Labriola, as you've said, and Nancy, I'm thrilled to be here on your podcast. I am a geezer or a beezer, hopefully both. I use the term geezer in a friendly way and kind of own it. That as much as I love old age, we have to make some concessions to it just because somehow we do slow down a little bit, and some of our priorities changed. And I'm turning 70 this year, so I'm in the same general age group as you. I'm a nurse, a counselor, and a hypnotherapist. I'm in private practice in Berkeley, California, and have been in private practice for over 30 years. And I do work with a lot of people who are involved in consensual non-monogamy, a polyamory, open relationships, or however you want to describe it. I use those three terms interchangeably, but some people have different definitions for all three.
And just for our listeners, can you just explain a little bit as to what that whole category means? I actually was just asked to write an article for Next Tribe, which is an online magazine, which is a glossary of sexual terms, because I talk to people all the time in our age group who don't even know what ENM means or open relationships or polyamory. And I just say, this is where the sex and tech thing comes in. I just say, Google it and watch a video.
Okay. In the 1970s, when I first became non-monogamous, polyamorous, or whatever you want to call it, the term polyamory hadn't been invented, and we used to just call it open relationships or ethical non-monogamy. And we used the term ethical non-monogamy to differentiate it from people who have made a commitment or agreement with a partner or spouse to be sexually and romantically exclusive, but who cheat and break that agreement.
60% of the population. If you doubt that, watch the new docuseries about Ashley Madison. It's, speaking of mind blown, it's like crazy. But
I don't doubt it at all. The research I've done indicates that depending on whose numbers you believe, 20 to 40% of married women have cheated during the course of their marriage, and somewhere between 50 and 80% of married men have cheated during their marriage, depending on whose research and whose numbers you believe. So I don't doubt it at all. The term polyamory was invented in the 1990s and is kind of a bizarre term because it's a mixture of Greek and Greek and Latin roots, poly and amory, but it just means many loves. And sometimes that's been separated out from consensual non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy or open relationships. Sometimes some people separate that out because it means in literally many loves to mean like having like a group marriage or multiple spouses, as opposed to having more than one sexual or romantic relationship. Again, I use the terms interchangeably, and what I always tell clients and anyone who contacts me, it doesn't matter what you call it as long as everyone involved is in agreement about what the definition is of the term.
So establishing rules if you're going to be in an ethically non-monogamous relationship. And when you talk about, if you're not comfortable, you don't have to make it that personal, but did you also tell me at some point that you're bisexual?
That is true. I have been a card-carrying bisexual and polyamorous since 1969 and proud of it. And for me, anyway, being bisexual made it seem quite dubious that I would really be able to promise and deliver strictly monogamous a relationship, as a lifetime thing with one person, because I have a strong romantic and affectional and sexual orientation towards more than one gender.
So how old were you when you first decided that this was going to be your sexual lifestyle and romantic lifestyle?
14.
And how was it received by the people around you? Did you grow up in Berkeley? Because I would imagine.
No, I am trailer trash from New Jersey. So believe me, it was not accepted gracefully by anyone around me. So it was somewhat necessary for me to eventually flee that environment. And I sometimes jokingly say, well, living in Berkeley, it's the only place I could really live my life without being, burned at the stake or run out of town on a rail or something.
That's right. The expression we used to use back in the 70s is "let your freak flag fly." It's a mouthful.
Right.
But
doesn't work so well in a small town in New Jersey. Not at that time. I'm hoping things have gotten better there since then, but
yeah, and I do think that this next generation, in many ways, is much more comfortable with their sexuality and their sexual decisions. I was just watching an episode of Law and Order SVU, and Mariska Hargitay's character's son comes out and tells her that he's bisexual. And he's, relatively young in the show. I think he's supposed to be like 11 or 12. And I love the fact that they're now in popular media covering topics like that without sensationalizing them. Like Sister Wives is a great example of, sort of like the lurid reality TV version of polyamory. And they do tackle some of the issues, but it's not real. Lisa Ling has been, she about 10 years ago did a series about life in America and is really trying to dispel some of the myths about people who choose to live alternative lifestyles. Because even though you mentioned you do live on a commune and you raise chickens, you're also a practicing nurse, which is a professional. And I think there's still this concept that people who are living alternative lifestyles are just weird, dirty hippies, even in 2024, which is unfortunate. So what are some of the...
do you mind if I interrupt you for a moment? You mentioned sister wives. I often want to really make a distinction between polygamy and polyamory. Now, polygamy is a system where women are forced to be sexually and romantically monogamous with one man, but the man is allowed to have more than one wife. And that is very different than polyamory, where anyone of any gender is allowed to consensually have other relationships, more than one relationship, if they so choose.
That's a great point. Thank you for clarifying that. And I do think that sometimes pop culture, for the sake of ratings, will throw all this stuff together just to appeal to the prurient interests of viewers without really explaining how it should work in the real world, which is a really good segue into, in your practice, if a couple comes to you and they're thinking of opening up their relationship, what is some of the generic counsel that you would give to them in that process?
Well, probably the most important is, like, why are they doing this? What are their motives? And what are their goals and intent? What do they hope to achieve? And that way I can discover whether is their relationship, are they completely incompatible? And they're somehow trying to fix that by being in some form of polyamorous or open relationship, in which case they probably need to work on the problems they have first to decide whether they're even at all compatible to stay in this relationship. And then what are their intentions? What are their goals? Are those realistic? Can those goals are they actually going to be likely to get what they want out of being in an open relationship? They often have very unrealistic ideas. And so that's my first priority in working with someone, a couple or individual that comes to me. Often it's one individual in the couple who's either pushing the idea or who's reluctant about the idea.
Right.
So then the second thing is for them to, if it turns out they are compatible, to stay in their marriage or relationship, and if the goals they're trying to reach seem realistic to actually achieve in a poly situation, then I try to help them identify what model of non-monogamy are they looking for. I think a lot of people don't realize there are many different models, and your exploration is likely to succeed or fail based on whether you pick the right model. If you're in a marriage or long-term committed relationship, most people in that situation are seeking outside relationships that will be in some way less important, less prioritized, less time-consuming than the marriage, or what I sometimes call nesting relationship, the living together or married relationship. Usually that's what people are seeking, and it's important for them to talk that through, because that may be what their idea is, but in reality, one or both partners may actually fall madly in love with someone else, and then that's a whole different model if you're talking about having two very significant or primary relationships. So it's good to talk through what it is you think is going to happen, what it is you want to happen, and what are the possible pitfalls of that.
And what happens when, a couple says, oh, yeah, we're going to try this. We both want this. We're going to agree to it. Even if someone is not 100% committed and they come around, they say, all right, let's stick our toe in the water. And then somebody gets jealous. Somebody wants more time with somebody else than their nesting partner. Do they then come back to you and say, how do we navigate this situation?
That happens a lot. And certainly it's just perfectly normal and natural that people get jealous. And so that is a problem, but it's a problem that is to be expected. And oftentimes people will say, well, gosh, my partner has a new relationship and I'm so shocked that I'm jealous, or I'm so surprised that I'm jealous. I didn't think I'd be jealous. And I'll say, well, I'm shocked that you're shocked. I'm surprised that you're surprised. Why wouldn't you be jealous? Why wouldn't you feel insecure, frightened, concerned, feel threatened because your partner is out having sex, romance, and possibly love with another person? And that's something very new that you've never experienced before in this relationship, or in most cases, you've never experienced that before in your life. So, why wouldn't that trigger a lot of jealousy and insecurity? And let's talk about how you can better manage that. I think a lot of times people think, well, I just shouldn't be jealous, or I should be able to overcome jealousy. Well, I just tell people, as far as jealousy goes, expect it, accept it, and try to learn how to manage it without murder or mayhem. And that's all you could expect, is to be able to manage it and say, well, okay, these are feelings of anxiety and insecurity. And, where are they coming from? And how can I manage them so that I can be at least okay with my partner having another relationship? I don't have to feel perfectly great about it or happy about it. I just have to be able to tolerate it and allow them to explore that without interfering, disrupting, or creating major drama.
And what would you say is the success rate of polyamorous relationships? Are there any statistics on that at all?
Not really. There really is not any real data out there, unfortunately. The only data that we really have is that at any given moment, about 20% of people, sexually active people in the U.S., who are adults and engaging in some form of relationship, at least 20% of them at any given moment are in some form of open or non-monogamous relationship, but only about 5% of adults that are in relationships are in a polyamorous or non-monogamous relationship for a lifetime, or that's the lifestyle or relationship style or model that they choose and maintain and sustain for their entire adult lives.
So you can kind of, pun intended, come and go. Like it doesn't have to be, a decision where, you become a card-carrying polyamorous person and you've committed for life. It could be something that you experiment with at any stage in your life and then say, yeah, I kind of like this for now. Or you say, maybe this really isn't for me. I had met a man at one point who was in an ethically non-monogamous relationship, and he'd been married a very long time, and he was very upset that his wife wanted to see her boyfriend more than one day a week. And so they were in the process of renegotiating. They probably could have used somebody like you to help them along the way. His reaction to that was, I think, as you said, stirring up jealousy. He, was in Phoenix on a business trip and asked, was on the apps looking for a date because I think he wanted to throw that in her face, which is just, to me, didn't seem particularly healthy.
Well, I mean, there is such a thing as a revenge affair, and plenty of people who are in monogamous relationships do that when they find out their partner has cheated. Right. They go and have a revenge affair to kind of go tit for tat or get back at the cheating spouse or whatever. It's not really a good motive, and it's not fair to the other person either that you're having some affair with, that, you're just with them kind of to get even with your spouse. But that's very different than someone saying, I'll be happier about allowing or feeling comfortable with my partner having another relationship that takes up a fair amount of their time and attention, I'll be happier about that if I also have a partner that I really like and that I enjoy spending time with. That's not the same as like a revenge affair.
Right,
That's
right.
like, well, there's a certain equilibrium that will make everybody in this situation happy. I won't be sitting home lonely wondering about what my spouse is doing with this other person and feeling hurt and rejected if I am out having a good time myself. Now, certainly you can go out and have a good time with your friends, or you could, do some
Right.
other
You could watch Netflix,
well.
you could bake cookies. But I do, I think, sexuality is very complicated. And if you know that someone you really care about is out having sex with somebody else, I could see that even though you may not think of it as necessarily as revenge, it is just kind of a natural human tit for tat, again, pun intended,
Right.
reaction.
Well, and that to me, that's a good segue into if you are in a couple and you're considering having other relationships, very important to consider how this is going to affect these other people that you get involved with. You have to be very clear as to what can you actually promise them, or what are you actually able to deliver or sustain with them. Don't mislead them or deceive them in getting involved with them. Some couples have a preference for dating other people that are also married.
Right.
Because then, generally speaking, they're going to be comfortable with what you can offer them because they're committed to another person too, and they're not really looking for marriage or a primary relationship with you. They don't have the time or the bandwidth
Exactly.
for that.
And that's, frankly, from a personal standpoint, that's one of the reasons why I've never been particularly interested in that lifestyle, because as a single woman, I don't want, my birthday comes around, and if someone's rules are they always spend Saturday night with their significant other, and I end up alone on my birthday because that's not part of their rules. I did think it through at a very intellectual level, and you have to kind of know yourself too, and know,
Sure.
what your tolerance is for jealousy, or, feeling you're abandoned, or not being properly treated like an important part of someone's life.
Right, not being treated respectfully and caringly, and feeling like you have access to that partner at times, like special times like a holiday or birthday, to be able to negotiate for those things. But I also think that you're very correct in saying that it may be right for people at certain times in their lives, not at others, or in certain relationships and not in others. And my experience is that there's quite a broad spectrum. I mean, there are some people that seem very clearly to be monogamous innately by orientation. That's their sexual, romantic, relational orientation, just as fixed as someone who's like 100% gay or 100% straight. They can't change that. That's a fixed orientation. And there seem to be at least a few people who have a fixed orientation towards polyamory or having more than one partner concurrently. But there are tons of people in between on that spectrum who I consider like the bisexuals of the polymonogamy spectrum, that at certain times in their lives, they're like very happy being monogamous, or in a certain relationship where most of their romantic and sexual and relational needs are being met. They don't have any interest or use for getting involved with anyone else. But at other times in their lives, they may feel more exploratory, or they may be in a relationship with someone where they're not getting some of their needs met, and they may decide, well, this is a good way of having this wonderful relationship I have, but also meeting some of the needs that are not really addressed in this relationship. So I think it's especially true for women that at certain times in our lives, like some women, I don't have children myself, but for many women that I've seen as clients who have kids, they may be polyamorous before they have kids, but when they have kids, they really just want to focus on that as being, the people that are so important in their lives, and they just don't have the energy or interest in any other outside, relationship.
And what's your perspective on that, as far as telling your kids if you and your significant other are pursuing a polyamorous lifestyle? Is it necessary to tell kids, or what's your point of view on that?
Well, it's a combination of things. Number one, is it age appropriate? And in that regard, I tell people, well, if you were a single person and dating and not polyamorous, what would you tell your children about that person that you're dating? You're not going to tell them, I'm having sex with this person if the kid is 6 or 7 years old. You're going to tell them, this is a friend. This is a friend, and they're going to be staying over sometimes, and they're important to me. They're going to be important in our lives. And, you wouldn't describe it as a sexual relationship. Right. If they were 10 or 12, you would say, this is my boyfriend or girlfriend, and, they're going to be staying over a lot, and they're going to become a part of our lives in some way. So, that's important to say, well, how would you handle it if you were not polyamorous, but were dating someone? What would you tell your children? The other key point is, you don't want to lie to your children, and you don't want to, because you don't want them to think you're a liar, and you don't want to be a liar and think that, and have them believe that they can't trust you to tell them the truth. And you don't want to behave as if you're doing something you're ashamed of or embarrassed about. Oftentimes, it's fine not to tell them, but if you're behaving in like a guilty or ashamed way, like sneaking around, that distresses children because they think something's wrong with what's happening here, and I don't know what it is, but I feel very unsafe. So if you're not going to tell them, then you have to be able to behave like everything's perfectly fine and there's nothing unusual going on. My experience is once the kids are 10 or 11, they will guess exactly what's going on and will feel like, I can't trust my parents because they're lying to me about something that's pretty significant that's going on in their life. And children, as always, all they care about is, how does this affect me? They're self-centered, and they should be. They're children. They're supposed to be. And so all they're thinking about is, are my parents or one of them going to abandon me? Is my parent going to be available to me when I need them, like to make dinner or drive me to school? Or, they need to just be assured that, you're going to be there for them. And that's really all they care about. And to be assured that you're not doing something you're uncomfortable or ashamed of that they need to then feel unsafe or confused about.
Well, thank you, Kathy. This has been super educational and enlightening. Is there anything else that you would like to tell our listeners about things to think about if they decide that they're going to experiment with an alternate lifestyle after 50?
Well, luckily, there are lots of resources out there. There is actually for polyamorous people or people of any age who are exploring or want to consider exploring this kind of alternative lifestyle. But for elders, there is an online community called Polygeezer community.
Oh, I love that. And you wrote a book.
Owning that.
You wrote a book as well. You wrote a book as well, yes?
I did. I just want to make sure people know there is a whole online community of elders who are practicing polyamory or have practiced it in the past or are, interested in it or considering it. And so I would encourage you to go online and find Polygeezer's community. A wonderful medical doctor named Ken Haslam invented the term polygeezers and has been using it with that community for a long time. I did write a book called Poly Elders, Aging in Open Relationships, and that is useful. But there are also lots of other resources online, free workshops and classes. There are lots and lots of books now on polyamory. When I first wrote my first book on polyamory called Love in Abundance in 2008, I only wrote it because there were very, very few resources out there. Luckily, it's become outdated, which is great because that means good things have happened and positive things, it's changed in a positive way. So I've just written a new edition of Love in Abundance to update it. So that's the good news, that things are changing for the better to the point where I had to rewrite the book.
Very, very cool. So thank you again, Kathy, for being a guest today. This was really insightful, educational, provocative. If you have any questions for Kathy, what's the best way for people to reach you?
You can email me at anarchofeminist@yahoo.com. You can call me at 510-84-5307. I have lots of free videos and articles and podcasts and things on my website, which is kathylabriola.com.
And that's Kathy with a K.
Kathy with a K, labriola.com. And people can order my books from me on my website, or you can buy them on indiebound.org or bookshop.com. Excuse me, bookshop.org.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy. This has been terrific. And for my listeners, you can find my podcasts on Apple, Spotify, wherever you happen to get your podcasts. As I said, I've recorded over 30 episodes so far. Heading towards 100 really rapidly. If you'd like to be a guest, remember it's thegeezerproofer at gmail.com. And although I love the fact that we're all using the term geezer, because I did get a lot of shit when I first launched the podcast that people thought it was pejorative. It is a word that is really starting to ooze out there. But, I choose to be a beezer, someone who is an active geezer. So aspire to be a beezer rather than a geezer. Have a wonderful day. Peace out.